How can there possibly be sufficient time in budget estimates when the government decides to use every possible method to block the opposition parties from asking their questions by providing lengthy 59-minute answers that don't even answer the question at hand? A very real question, for example, yesterday by my honourable colleague from Birch Cove, a very simple question about how that critical situation at Talbot House was being dealt with, or not being dealt with, as the case may be. These are important issues that need to be discussed. Every department has very important issues, whether it's transportation, justice, every department, Service Nova Scotia, they all have extremely important issues, and you're never going to get to every single one of them through the budget process, of course. But the fact of the matter is that the government has decided that there are certain departments that it doesn't want questioned, and so it has come up with a plan in the other chamber that those departments will not be called. And there's a way, and the way they're doing that is by filling the time each day when the opposition parties are ready to move on. That's, frankly, is it within the rules? Absolutely. I would not for a second say it's not within the rules, but it's disrespectful of the process. It's absolutely disrespectful of a process, and in fact, members of the NDP have said that very thing when the Tories did it in opposition. So for them to change their mind now and say that it isn't disrespectful, that's quite a change. The members of the governing caucus. Members of the governing caucus have the opportunity, of course, to question the ministers and the departments at caucus meetings, and access to which the opposition parties do not have. And isn't it interesting that as we move forward, it was the government that pushed to actually even then cut estimates in half further coming into this budget round to 40 hours from the 80. Can you imagine how many fewer departments we would have got to in that case? We would have had very few at all. And so, and then the government wonders why the opposition parties were not prepared to agree to the request to go from 80 hours of debate to 40 hours of debate on the budget. It's quite simple why we wouldn't agree to go from 80 to 40. The reason is because the reason that we would not agree to that request was quite simple. It's because the government is already trying to ensure that questions don't get answered, and to cut that time by half would just result in a further cutting of that time. You know, there are many issues in many different areas on the minds of Nova Scotians. I'm sure that the Minister of Energy and the Minister of Environment would probably agree that when we did estimates in the other room, there were issues we agreed on, and there were issues we didn't agree on. And we were able to, get some information on some of those, and I know in both cases ministers have committed to getting back to me with information about their departments and questions we had. But when it comes down to trying to just simply run the clock on an answer without actually answering the question in budget estimates, when that is the primary and most important role of the legislature, that's unfair to Nova Scotians, Madam Speaker. That's unfair to people who had real questions last night about the issue of Talbot House and how that's being handled. And if the minister feels that that's been appropriately handled, that's fine. That she's entitled to that view, but it's also up to her to defend that and to be willing to answer the questions instead of telling us what she had for lunch. Because that isn't an answer to a very serious question. And how can that be anything but disrespectful to the men and women who have volunteered for an organization like that, the men and women who seek services from an organization like Talbot House, the men and women, in fact, who seek services and addiction services and other services like that from organizations across Nova Scotia. Many of them who were watching last night and wondering how the minister would respond to those questions would certainly have been shocked to learn that the answer to the member for Bedford Birch Cove's question was a 59-minute rant that included a discussion about what she had for lunch. Simply, you can't even begin to pretend that that's part of the policy framework that is covered in the budget. And I don't know how the minister can even pretend that it is. I respect the fact that the minister may have a differing opinion from either this caucus or the caucus of the third party on that issue. That's fair enough. I respect the fact the minister may very well believe that that situation in question was handled correctly and appropriately. That's fair enough. It's not fair enough as a minister of the Crown to be unwilling to answer the questions that the members put before her about how it was handled, why it was handled in a certain way, and whether the policies were appropriately followed as they're outlined by the department, which is something that the member for Bedford Birch Cove was starting to discuss in question period earlier today. These are very real issues, and 80 hours isn't a huge amount of time to get into any of the departments or the budgets, and I'm sure it's limited to 80 hours for very good reasons, because otherwise we'd probably be here till the end of time, and it has to have a limit at a certain point. At the end of the day, the 80 hours needs to be used to answer questions, not to, especially answers on issues that are within the minister's jurisdiction and her department, issues which are of grave concern to a lot of Nova Scotians at the moment, issues which are of the public moment, and issues which concern the policy direction, which is paid for through the budget of the province. The budget is the most important thing. Whether we agree with the budget or not, it's the most important thing we will do over the in this session. And we know that there are very real issues. We know that there are people on income assistance who feel, and I know the minister knows this because I saw a response from her to an email this morning, where feel that their income assistance has actually been cut and reduced, despite the fact the government claims they've increased that amount. There's a number of clients on income assistance who feel that the amount they're receiving has been reduced by backdoor means. And I know the minister is aware of this concern, because, as I said, I saw a response from her, an emailed response to her, or by her to a constituent this morning. And those are the kind of things that, among many issues, that deserve answers, and the place for those answers are in budget estimates. And for the people who were watching last night, waiting to see what the minister's response to those issues were, understanding what she had for lunch when some of those people couldn't afford lunch themselves was reasonably disrespectful, Madam Speaker. And so the minister may have thought she was being funny by playing that game. But there are a lot of men and women across this province who tuned in to see what the answers would be and what the discussion would be on those very real issues, who didn't think it was all that funny, who found themselves disrespected and underappreciated, and who felt that their real concerns of affordability and living day to day and actually being able to afford to put food on the table weren't being answered by a minister who was more concerned with playing a bit of a game. And so, hopefully, we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens today when the questions continue on other issues within that department, and maybe over the next couple of days. And maybe it'll come down to over whatever there is, the remaining 9 hours or something in the Red Room. Maybe there'll only be 9 questions asked. Maybe that's as far as we're going to get, and we'll see. But there are a lot of people who are struggling to survive day to day.
Order, please. Recognize the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much.
On a point of order.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on a point of order, it seems to me that the member talking about the disrespect of the Minister of Community Services is rather ironic, given that the Liberal Party didn't even call the Department of Community Services in the last budget that we had, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. that would not be a point of order, but I recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you. Yeah, that's not even, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate that ruling, because it even close to a point of order. The, you know,
Order. Sorry, the time allotted for the member has expired. I now recognize the honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I want to talk about a slightly different topic today, although I was just as upset yesterday when the minister spoke for 59 minutes and talked about what she had for lunch. It sort of feeds into what I'm going to talk about here today. You know what? I'm going to talk about the better deal for today's families that was touted by this government during the last election campaign. Well, I want to go over what that better deal for today's families is really broken down to over that time. And I'm sure that the people in the community that are low income and have difficulty paying for lunch now are going to be interested in what the Minister of Community Services had to say what she had for lunch. You know, when this government took power in 2009, the price of gasoline was $1.05, and today it's $1.40, but it was last week or the week before $1.45. It's a 40-cent increase in fuel. You look at home heating oil, it's again roughly about a 40-cent increase in home heating oil. So you look at those two things and say, well, you know, that goes up, it's the price of oil and everything is up, but you look at the GST that's being charged on the tax on gasoline, and they have increased the cost to the people of the province substantially, absolutely substantially. So as you go through this process, and people wonder why they don't have the disposable income they had just 3 years ago, to pay for basic things. And I don't think most people have figured it out. But I can tell you what's happened, and people will figure this out, and they're in the process of figuring it out. And as soon as you talk one-on-one with an individual or a family, they're not long to realize, oh yes, the GST has gone up 2%, costing the province, the taxpayers of the province $1 million a day. $1 million a day. So that doesn't sound like much, but that means 2% of every after-tax dollar you receive is going back to the government again. That's 2% in lost spending that you can do to feed your family, pay for your gasoline, pay for your heating in your home, pay for your insurance on your home, pay for your electricity bill. I talk about electricity bill. Electricity bill has gone up substantially under this government, and yet they refuse to go to the Public Utilities Board. They refuse to change anything with the Nova Scotia Power, while at the same time they allow Emera to accept $100 million a year from Nova Scotia Power. $100 million a year the taxpayers of this province are paying to support a private company which was set up by the former government, the Conservative government. So when you take the cost of power, when you talk to the cost of power, the cost of heating oil, the cost of diesel, the cost of home heating oil, and all the other things that add up, all of a sudden you realize I don't have as much money to spend. I don't have as much money to spend on the essentials I need for my family. And if you take a look at that and realize what's happened in just 3 years, 3 years, that's all it's taken under this better deal for today's families, some better deal. People can't afford to put insurance on their homes anymore. I was speaking to some people the other day that trying desperately to get their roof fixed on their house because they have no insurance. No insurance. They can't afford to pay the insurance because they can't afford to get the roof fixed. Why can't they afford to get the roof fixed? Because this government has made it so expensive to live in Nova Scotia that it's just almost unbearable, especially if you're on low income or fixed income, such as seniors are. And then if you look at the average cost of food, a family of four has roughly gone up $100 a month. That's $1,200 a year. And that's after-tax money. That's after-tax money. That's a lot of money for a family of four, a lot of money. It's expensive as it is to buy groceries. So when you factor all these things in, you see the cost of things escalating under this government, and all they do is seem to raise taxes, but yet they're cutting education, cutting education substantially, cutting health care. It's going to be interesting to see when this strike is over and they make some kind of deal with their union friends, and how much this is going to cost. What's it going to cost? So how much more they're going to have to cut out of the health care budget to pay for their union friends getting whatever kind of settlement they're going to get. So it's going to be interesting as this all unfolds, and as we go down further down the road with this better deal for today's families that this NDP party offered to families during the last election. And then you look at the incredible amount of not financing, but the advertising they have done to promote these things they're doing. Absolutely to promote it. Signs on every building you can imagine. You know, it's another growth under the NDP government, and my good friend Digby, that represents Digby, indicated that they had put a sign up on a facility that, you know, Darrell Dexter's name and the minister's name, and that the community had fundraised for, and indeed had very little input in the whole thing, but they put their big sign up, and I don't know how much it cost them to travel down there and dig the holes for the sign and to print the sign and erect the sign. Probably it was very substantial. If they would have taken that amount of money and given it to the organization, it would have helped their organization a lot more. That indeed is helping the whole community. So this sort of thing is happening. Watching TV ads on TV about better care sooner, how wonderful it is. It's costing people money for these ads, money for the ads, but yet they cut money from health care. They're talking about the Jobs Here program. The jobs continue to reduce in the province. And again, the jobs are reducing because of the regressive tax system they've put in place and the extreme costs for people. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday, and he said he's moving to Alberta. He is moving to Alberta. He can make more money there. He worked 6 months in Alberta and come back to Nova Scotia, invest in Nova Scotia. He said, I'm fed up with it. I'm selling my home. I'm moving to Alberta. I'm going to stay there. And he said, you know, I have 4 of my friends that this week are doing exactly the same thing. Because when you realize how expensive it is to live here, how regressive some of these tax structures are, and how it's negatively affecting every family in this province, you realize how devastating this impact is going to be in the province long term that's been imposed by this NDP government. And as we see this unfold more and more and more, and as people start to realize just how serious this is for their families, and over time, it takes a long time for people to erode their savings, a long time for the sort of credit card bills to build up so high that they have a problem with them. And you see more and more bankruptcies in the province, and you're going to see a lot more as time goes on. But it takes a long time for all these things to accumulate. And as it slowly accumulates, people are wondering why they can't buy the things they did. And I'm saying basic things, the basic things. You need insurance on your home and your vehicles. You need a decent vehicle you can travel to work with. You need a home that you can maintain and look after. And you need to make sure that your children have a good education. And then children are involved in things in the community that keeps them out of trouble. You know, today, it's very expensive to have children in hockey or baseball or soccer, whatever the case may be. And indeed, I would bet you that some families are going to be faced this year with whether or not their children could go in those sports. And those sports are wonderful team builders. They're fun for the children, and indeed keep the children out of trouble when they could be doing other things that then everybody else would cost our taxpayers money. So as you add this accumulative effect that this government has imposed on the people of Nova Scotia, you're going to see very, very serious consequences. I would think that probably over time, hopefully I'm wrong, that our crime rate will increase. That will not be good. We've seen already the MOU canceled by this government. Memorandum of Understanding is canceled by this government to the municipalities. And I mean, if you just read it in the paper, say, well, that doesn't really bother me. I'm just a regular taxpayer. It doesn't bother me at all. But from what the information I've been receiving from some of the municipalities, it indicates some of them are talking 2-cent increase per hundred of assessment on their property taxes. That's another burden that's been placed by this government on the people of Nova Scotia. And as this all accumulates, it's $100 here, $50 there, maybe $500 there, maybe only $10 in this particular item, but over time that just erodes your income and your disposable income, the money you have to spend to ensure that your family is well looked after and your property is maintained. I believe that a lot of people, instead of traveling in Nova Scotia to some small vacation or a campground or something this year, they may not even be able to do that when they start to finally figure out what this government is doing to them. And as this whole thing progresses and we see more and more and more impact on the people of the province, people are going to figure this out. They're going to figure out, why do I have so little money? This government has also, neglected to mention so far, is increased income tax every year. It's called bracket creep. That means your income tax is going up. So you're getting hit with a double whammy. Your income tax is going up, and so is your GST by a total of 2%. So as your income comes up, that means your disposable income goes down slightly, and your disposable income goes down again because of the GST. So I don't know the exact percentage when you factor the income tax per family, but it will depend, of course, on income. And the lower income individuals, even though they will see less income tax that they have to pay, it will have a bigger impact. Whereas someone makes a substantial amount of money and you lose a little bit more in income tax or the GST, they just have to adjust what they do and they can survive it. But lower income Nova Scotian and middle income Nova Scotians are going to have a great deal of difficulty surviving through this economic crisis that's being forced upon them by this government. So they've done very well. This government's done very well. They've managed to put the GST up, put income tax up, price of fuel's gone up, heating fuel, gasoline, diesel, groceries have gone up in price, electricity's gone up in price, property taxes are going up.
Cars are more expensive, Dave.
What's that again? Yes? Yeah. Everything is going up. So, you know, the members over there sometimes heckle me when I talk about this stuff, but it'll be interesting to see what their constituents say to them in their offices when they come to visit them, and what they're going to say during the next election when they realize that what this better deal for today's families was all about. Was voting getting this government elected, nothing to do with helping Nova Scotians. But of course, though, they have made some major concessions to their big financial supporters, the unions, and I've talked about that before. In my small riding where I've been campaigning for a long time, and every party I've ever seen is when you had local people campaigning. And we ran into a couple of people in my area campaigning on the same street. The candidate for the NDP was there that day, very honorable lady. And there was some people supplied from out of province with their clipboards, and one of my campaign workers sort of stopped and chatted to them and said, "Where are you from?" And they were from out of the province. "Where are you staying?" "At the local hotel." And well, that's very interesting. Well, we don't have money to put up people in local hotels. So where did that money come from? Was that accounted for in the election expenses? Could be a pretty interesting question to ask. Maybe that's accountability we should have from this government. They, you know, when you see what's happened, and you see what is happening, and you see all these costs that have increased for everyday Nova Scotians, the people in the province that pay the taxes and work, and see what happens to them, what's happening to them. You know, even if it means a local car dealership sells 2 or 3 less cars a year. That doesn't sound like much, but it is, because what will happen is over time, all of a sudden a parts guy or a salesman or a technician that works on the cars won't have a job anymore. And lo and behold, there won't be another job to go to because it's getting very difficult. And I just wanted to remind Nova Scotians of what exactly has been downloaded on them by this government. A better deal for today's families? I don't think so. And they're going to realize it, and they're going to react during the next election. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the honourable member for the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I can't resist. I have to do this. Madam Chair, it is true that Nova Scotians do struggle with the with questions of affordability and the cost of living. And probably one of the biggest burdens that Nova Scotians have to deal with is the incredible debt load of this province, an amount of close to, well, I guess it's almost as much as the Department of Education's entire budget, Madam Chair, to service our debt. And that is the legacy of those two opposition parties across the floor. And they can come in here and they can distort the facts of the programs of this government over the past 3 years. But that is a fact that no one in this province will forget. And that is a fact that is the basis, in fact, for how this particular party got into government. I've knocked on doors in this province for many, many years, Madam Chair, and Madam Speaker, and I know very clearly the reasons why people wanted an NDP government. And they wanted an NDP government to stop the atrocious abuse of the taxpayers and citizens in this province over a very lengthy period of time. We've been saddled with debt for far too long by the kinds of self-serving approaches that we've seen from the previous two opposition parties. So that contributes to the great difficulty that people have day to day in this province. That's the first thing I would say, Madam Speaker. The second thing that we need to keep in mind here, I think, is that the members of the official opposition did not support tax reform, for example, removing the HST from home heating. And they stand here so self-righteous around this, but that is the fact. Well, Madam Chair, I was here, and the member from Yarmouth was not when that vote occurred.
Order. Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The truth hurts, doesn't it? And members on that side, they can dish it out, but they can't take it, Madam Chair. You can't take it. You can dish it out, but you can't take it. So,
Order. I would just remind the Minister that your comment should be directed to the Chair, not the member opposite. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you. So there is a legacy of very poor decision-making that has contributed to terrible debt load that people in this province are burdened with, that makes it extraordinarily challenging for a government to be able to move this province forward. But in spite of that, Madam Speaker, that's exactly what this government is doing, moving this province forward. The second thing I would remind members from the other side, they conveniently forget that the facts demonstrate the worst economic performance of any province in the country in the past 20 years was this province. And that, well, the member from Bedford says during the recession, I'm afraid we were not in recession for 20 years in this country, Madam Speaker. We have seen great periods of prosperity during the past 20 years, but not for Nova Scotia, not for Nova Scotia. And opposition parties did not make the choices, the prudent choices, the choices that focused on job creation and job development that were required for a robust economy, one that would see economic growth and would allow us prosperity that would not only mean that families were gainfully employed and able to stay in their own province, in their own community as contributors, but also a way to strengthen our social programs and our healthcare system, our education system. So these two parties have very little to teach this government in terms of economic performance and investment in social programs, I have to tell you, Madam Speaker. The member talked about the great challenges that families have with affordability issues around energy. And, you know, I represent a fabulous constituency, very diverse constituency. Many people have modest incomes. Many seniors are on fixed incomes, a large student population, lots of people who live in poverty, and lots of working people. Day to day, people do struggle with the rising cost of living. It is something that concerns all of us. We see these problems throughout the Western world. We still have a very precarious economic recovery in our world economic system, and we're far from out of the woods yet. But this government has had the foresight to work with vision, to work strategically, to look at what are those areas where we have some competitive advantage. We know that our harbor, we know that our shipbuilding industry presents a real opportunity for not only our existing generation, but for generations to come. And this is an area where we have made decisions for strategic investment that will hold this province in very good stead and give us prosperity that will have the kinds of benefits that will not only accrue directly to people who work in the shipbuilding industry, but certainly will have spin-off effects throughout our whole community and our whole province. And this is something that we, on this side of the House, legitimately feel very proud of, and we feel that all members of this House should celebrate the success of this kind of a focus and strategic decision. And all we hear from the other side is negativity at a time when our province really is on the cusp of something that's very significant, that is going to have great benefit and offers great hope and great promise, particularly for so many young families and young people and tradespeople who have left our province to look for opportunities elsewhere. So this is, I think, an insult, really, to have people, as members of our legislature, stand up and really denigrate the great opportunities and the great benefits that policy that's focused on jobs and the future and prosperity will give us, and do that in a way that fails to acknowledge the weakness and the failure of previous administrations to do the kinds of things that are needed to move our province forward. So it is a little galling to sit here and have the record distorted so completely by members opposite. The other thing I would say, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, is that, you know, we have strategically invested in our social programs. And our Minister of Community Services is very concerned about people who live in poverty. She has worked very hard to bring new resources, to improve social programs, to improve housing, to invest strategically in various social programs, through tax rebates, through improvements in the social assistance program, through better housing, the development of a housing strategy, to put outreach workers in the community to work with young people at risk, and to have a member of the House stand up and reduce the comments that she made the other evening in debate to her discussing what she had for lunch is thoroughly disrespectful, and it does not represent what occurred here in the hour that she spoke. And all members in this House are entitled to speak for 1 hour going into supply. It has happened many, many times with many, many members from all of the political parties. So to focus on the Department of Community Services and the minister in that way, Madam Speaker, I believe is very unfair. And it's particularly unfair given I've been here in this legislature for 14 years. I think last spring's budget was the first time that the Department of Community Services budget was not called for this chamber by the opposition. This never happens. It was shocking to me as the third largest department of government. So, you know, people can get on their high horse. I've been known to get on my own high horse from time to time. We're not always right when we get on our high horses, you know? And I would just like to point out that that party did not take the opportunity. If community services is so important to them, then why indeed did they not treat it with the importance that they say they attach to it in this particular debate? You know, so I think it's not fair to attack the Minister of Community Services in this way. There are substantial numbers of hours left in the budget estimates around community services, and there will be a lot of opportunity to discuss what I think and what I think we all feel is a very important department. And I really don't think it is called for to distort what the minister had to say to her discussing her lunch. Finally, I think, since I have the attention of everybody here in the House, I would like to end by talking a bit about some of the initiatives in my own department that aren't merely about dealing with health, but also are very much helping people with respect to the affordability issue. You know, there's no social program that is more important to people with limited incomes than health care. And every time we invest and expand a health care program, we are certainly making life more affordable for many, many people who don't have to go without services and don't have to go into the private sector to purchase service. You know, I feel very strongly about our public health care system. It probably, along with education, is the great equalizer in our society. It is the program that it makes really very little difference if you make $150,000 a year or if you make $10,000 a year. You get in the queue according to where the doctor puts you in the queue in terms of your need and your acuity. So with those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I thank you and I'll take my place.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Glace Bay with 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just quickly, with 1 minute to respond to the minister, I really don't understand the distinction, I guess, as a first-time member for budget estimates last year. I was the critic for community services. I did over 2 hours of questions to the minister on housing, on income assistance, on employment support. It was in the red chamber, but I'm not worried about the TV cameras or Hansard. I had legitimate questions that I was asking on behalf of my constituents. So to suggest that we didn't show respect to the minister by taking it here, I think is ridiculous and unfair. to put on me. Secondly, with some of her comments about economic development, we have one of the lowest growths in the province as a GDP in this country as a province. We aren't pumping out jobs. Rural Canada is shrinking. It's shrinking rapidly. Halifax is doing great. We're proud of that. But Madam Speaker, there are big decisions that this government makes. That was
1 minute. The motion is carried. We'll now take a few moments to bring in staff and set up for Committee of the Whole House on Supply. order, please. Committee of the Whole House on Supply will come to order. We are debating Resolution 3 and 33 with the Department of Community Services. There's 39 minutes remaining in the Progressive Conservative Caucus, and I would now recognize the honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome back, Minister. I want to, if I could, just follow up on what transpired during question period today. And during question period, we pointed out some inconsistent comments that were made, and they've caused a great deal of uncertainty among private operators in the childcare sector. So my question would be if you could explain both the rationale behind your department's decision to conduct a review in the first place and the details of the review as well.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Firstly, Madam Speaker, may I table some information that the member asked for yesterday?
Yes, you certainly may.
There are 3 things that the member requested, and that was the communications budget, and we have that here provided with a listing. The FTEs for the corporate services, and thirdly, the credit cards that are distributed within community services. I would like to take the opportunity to make just a quick comment on the credit cards, because I think it's important for Nova Scotians to know that it was when the NDP government came in that we made a decision to cut cabinet ministers' monthly car allowance of $700 plus the gas card, and so we're the first government that has made that decision and have stuck by that. So you won't find any credit card on this list in my name whatsoever. Okay. So if I can present that. So now with regards to the member's question in terms of the nonprofit and the profit daycares. I have, since I've been Minister of Community Services, I've taken the opportunity to meet with both those organizations. I do know previously, the previous government and the minister would meet with the organization, nonprofit and profit together in the same room, because there are differencing of opinions between those 2 organizations. I made the decision that there was no reason why I could not meet with each one of them individually as a group, because I felt it was important for each one of them to have the opportunity to express to me what their positions are with respect to the services that they provide. I've also been very open and frank with both groups that what we want to do as a department is to look at the whole child care development in the province, which would include daycares, but that's one element of it. You would also have early years, early intervention. And are we doing it? Are we providing the services in a correct manner now? Where can we improve on those services? And so that means to look at what other jurisdictions have been doing. I know that the member mentioned that I said about Prince Edward Island. Yes, Prince Edward Island went a route and made the decision as a government to just support nonprofit organizations. But I said that there's, what I was referring to was there's a model that we can look at, as there are many other models across the across Canada that would focus on having profit and nonprofit working together. So just because I said that PEI was one model that we would be looking at does not mean it shouldn't be taken as that means that that's the direction that we're going in, because I've been very clear. As I said, I've had several meetings with both organizations to express to them that what we need to do is we need to be able to look at the services today and allow Nova Scotians through a consultation process to inform us of what they feel would be a good service in the province of Nova Scotia for child care. And so, you know, when you are looking at any change, I think it's important to note that people have desired change. That was one of the reasons why they believe that they voted us in and change can be difficult because change is exactly that, doing something different than you've done before. If you analyze a situation or a service that you're providing, and that service is a good service, and there seems to be no need for change, then you won't change it. But if there's way to improve the services, and I think that everybody understands that every day is a different day, things change, and so that it's you know, it's important for us to take a leadership role, to not just sit on a situation and say, well, okay, this is the way the service has been for 20 years, so it must be a good service in the way that we should offer it. So really, there shouldn't be any more than that that's read into the nonprofit versus the profit. We understand, and have said this to the profit organizations, that they play an important role in the province of Nova Scotia. There's a large percentage, almost over half of the service that's provided as a daycare service in this province is through a profit. Also, one of the other aspects, and this has come forth from those in the profit sector, that they expressed to me that they actually have a concern for the quote, the big box daycare services themselves, because a lot of these, if you want to look at the type of business that's offering daycare in the province of Nova Scotia, the majority are small business people who are offering that service, or it may be somebody that, you know, that is doing it from their home. So we understand and realize and appreciate that, and I've expressed that to them, and they've been very open with me to say that, you know, in fact, that they have some issues also with the larger box type daycare services. So what we plan on doing, and I know the member mentioned in his question today about me saying to the group that there'd be changes in the summer, but what I did say to them was actually that there would be more information that I would be able to provide to them in the summer. And what that was is I met them before the throne speech, so I didn't have the opportunity to tell them, which I thought was very, very exciting news, that this government was going to go forward and do a very big consultation process that was not just a community services process, but a government process. And I think that's very important to note, that the different departments with respect to education, with respect to community services and health, we're coming together to invite people through a consultation process to come out and speak in communities and have parents come out and nonprofit and profit organizations to express their opinions on how they see the early years rolling out in the province. And like I said, once again, when I talk about early years, we're not just looking solely on daycares. We're looking at how are we doing with early intervention in terms of, are they receiving in that sector enough support? Is there a better way we can do business? Is there an overlapping of business in the services, or is there in some areas of the province receiving more service than others? And it's really important. I know that when you represent a constituency, your mindset often is on that constituency, but for us at a government and a ministerial level, we have to look at it in a holistic manner, and how are we performing throughout the entire province of Nova Scotia, and how are those services being provided? So that's what we're talking about. And as I said, I have met with both groups many times. I have been very open with them. I know that we did a press conference with CUPE. That was to support the fact that they were bringing forward the need for a government to look at the early years. And I did say at that time it wasn't any particular model or their model that we were supporting at that time, but what we were supporting was the fact that this is an is an issue in the province of Nova Scotia that deserves much more attention than it has received in the past. And as a government, we were willing to provide that type of support and go forward with a framework of consultation. And so that's what I want to be very clear about. There has been no decisions made supporting what sector, because we want the people of Nova Scotia to be able to participate in that decision-making process. And then when we hear from Nova Scotians, then we'll be able to work on a framework, and we'll know which direction that Nova Scotians and parents and grandparents wants us to go forward with within this province. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me first of all thank the Minister and the Department for supplying that information from our questions from last night. Again, thank you for that. Minister, you talk about consultations that are ongoing. So I guess I'd like to know who are you involving in this consultative process? You say the private and the not-for-profit daycares. You mentioned, are parents part of this consultation process?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
We haven't started the consultation process. We just had announced in the throne speech, so we are working now on our framework. So how do we go from here in terms of having a panel of advisory group that can bring together the community? It is my wish as a Minister of Community Services is that it is as open as possible, that parents have an opportunity. I mean, they're the ones who are affected by the services that they receive from us. So it would only make sense that parents would have that opportunity. What format that's going to be in presently, we haven't gotten to that point. But as soon as we do, I certainly do not mind at all to let the member opposite know how that's going to be put in a strategy, in a framework.
The honourable member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the Minister in the past has indicated there is a possibility of the private care owners being grandfathered into the funding formula. And again, this is in reference to the PEI model that she mentioned earlier. However, in PEI, grandfathering was the term used to describe the 5-year phase-out of their funding. So I would like to ask the Minister if she can confirm whether or not this might be one of the plans that her department is looking at. Is it, you did mention the PEI model, and only as a suggestion that it was a model that was out there. But is it at all being considered, and is it the same process as the 5-year phase-out plan that they do have at PEI now?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. No, we haven't gone into details of the Prince Edward Island model at all. As I said, we don't want to have a preconceived idea of how this will be formed. We want the public to be able to do that. I mentioned the word grandfather clause because of the fact that I was concerned with how the the profit sector would feel, and in terms of, I know it can be scary, you have a business, you're receiving funding, and I didn't want to creating any fear in that sector to think that we did not feel that we needed them or anything. So we know that those that are established now are very vital and very important to the role they play in the province. And so that it would be important to provide them with a sense of peace that, you know, we want to be there to support them. So we haven't made any decisions based on any models, because once again, I said we want the province, the people of the province of Nova Scotia to help formulate what they see and what kind of services they want and who provides those services.
The Honourable Member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question, Minister, would be, Do you plan to go into the details of the PEI plan?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Not at this point. It's not. It won't be any different than what we would do is we would look at what other models are out there in Canada, and that's what we tend to do when we're looking at any type of changes. We need to see what other jurisdictions are doing, whether it works for them or if it doesn't work for them. So the PEI model was just one example. I mean, I could pull out models from other provinces that we would give it the same consideration as what we would do with the Prince Edward Island model. Plus, I think what's more important than actually what's taking place in other parts of Canada, there's no reason there cannot be a Nova Scotia model. So a Nova Scotia model could look quite differently than any other models within Canada. The most important thing, I believe, for a Nova Scotia model is that it's a model that has been designed by the people of Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, in question period, we also pointed out a chronology of the different statements that were coming out concerning the review. It was taking place, it wasn't taking place, it wasn't affecting funding, and it was affecting funding. So I guess I'd like to ask the Minister why she's gone back and forth so much in those comments.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
What I'd like to say with that I have been consistent. What it is how things that a minister says are reported. And I often tell people that, and I'm sure the member opposite knows that what you read or hear or read in the media, for example, is not always word for word of what you're expressing. The same as a clip on in the radio or on television. It's you don't have the control over what has been edited, and so it may come out differently. But from day one, I have told both of those sectors that this is exactly what we would be doing. Is that it was very important for us to look at all different models across Canada, to look at what kind of model we may create in Nova Scotia, and also the key element was to include as many as possible in a consultation process. So, so my answer to that is I have been consistent. It's just what's being reported doesn't always come out in that manner.
The Honourable Member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I bring that up only because also in some of the quotes that were tabled today, the department is saying there's no review and there's no, so it seems that there's differing statements coming out from the minister and the department. So I guess I have to question that, but I'm going to move on to back to the private daycare centers. And we know that there is a review taking place, so I have to ask this particular question for the benefit of the private daycare centers that are out there, and that is if the phasing out of funding for these private daycare centers, is it still on the table, despite the fact that you said nothing's been decided? Is it still a possibility that the funding for these private daycares can be reduced or even eliminated?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Well, I do want to go back and clarify about, I think what people get mixed up with is terminology. Like you may use the word review and it means one thing to you. I may use the word review and it means something different. I think that's what the underlying issue here is with people's, when they hear a particular word. Really, review may not be the best word to use. What we're doing is a strategic planning and a strategic analysis of how things are today and where they should be in the future and how do we get there. So I would just caution that it's very important that what we need to do is that for people to understand, to ask more questions, in terms of what do you mean when you say the word review? Because I think that that's where some of the misunderstanding comes from. And certainly at this point, as I said, no decisions have been made because this is something that we want the people of Nova Scotia to make a decision on. Right now, there's absolutely no plans in the work to cut any funding to profit or non-profit organizations. We have 223 for-profit daycares in the province of Nova Scotia and 171 not-for-profit. So that would show you the significant role that the profit plays in providing that services. And I'm sure that both the profit and the non-profit, their ultimate goal is the best service possible that's being offered to children and to the parents of those children. So that's what I think is important to know. This we'll know much more once we go through the consultative process and we hear from people, and then we can have more discussions back and forth of how we frame this up and what we're going to do as a province in terms of the daycare services that are provided.
The honourable member for Victoria-the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I agree with the minister when she says there's a difference in interpretation of the word review. I think that's very evident that as discussions been going on with the case of Talbot House. So interpretation of review is certainly left to the person that's doing the speaking, I guess. I guess I want to go back once more to the private daycares. And these entrepreneurs, that's what they are, they're small entrepreneurs. Some might have more than one particular daycare center, they might have multiple. But they also have to look at the possibility of spending capital money to refresh or to do whatever to their buildings and the programs they offer. So, not knowing the certainty of what's going to happen, I think is put a pressure on the private daycare operator. So my question, can you give us a timeline? Can these daycare operators be assured that there will be something coming out soon, and when, if it comes to them having to make capital purchases, investments, or anything like that?
The Honourable Minister for Community Services.
What I would say to the profit sector is, number one, I do respect the fact about capital investment, but over the last several years, there's been millions of dollars, as you would know, through capital investments in profit and non-profit that they've received. And with regards to us moving forward, we're doing that as quickly as possible. We're hoping that it will be very soon that we'll be able to go forward with our framework, and then from that framework it will be, and I know that the member opposite understands that when you're developing a consultation process or any strategic plan, that you need to put a lot of thought into it and make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, that you have the right strategy, the right process in place, so that you will ensure that everybody has that opportunity to give their opinion. That's very important. You don't want to do something too quick that doesn't provide people with that opportunity. Plus, you don't want it to take too long, because then you're consulting for years or 2 years, and that doesn't help anyone in that respect. So, but I can tell you that we are working very diligently on that, and that you will see within this year that process being rolled out, and what the framework will look like, and what the consultation process will look like.
The Honourable Member for Victoria-the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sure the Minister can appreciate the concern of the private daycare owners, because there's still an uncertainty as to whether or not they're going to be there. They have no assurance from this Minister or from the Department that private daycares will still be operating in this province. So I'm sure, as I said, you can appreciate that concern. We know that not-for-profit daycares are going to be around because the majority of them are supported by the funding, and I realize too, Minister, that yes, there is funding available to the private daycares, but a lot of private daycare owners put that little bit extra there. And I think as a result of that, you have a better operation. Your parents are looking where they're going to send their child. And if there's a not-for-profit here that's top of the line, the private one might be a little bit above the top of the line. So they have to make a decision. So I'm sure you can appreciate the, I'm going to say urgency. I guess urgency would be a good word, of these private daycare owners finding out what will be happening to them. And I wonder if you could comment on that.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Well, I'm sure that the member opposite understands I can't speak to what happens in the future because I'm not going to say something if I can't make sure that what I say happens. But that's very important to me. I was brought up to speak the truth and to make sure that when you make a commitment, that commitment is seen through. And so I do respect the fact that people would be wondering, and I guess it's a fact of anybody. I was in small business myself. I didn't know, I didn't have a crystal ball to see in the future either, so I had to make decisions around that. However, we do understand that when you make change, that change can create fear. I don't think that there's many human beings that don't get a little knot in their stomach if something's changing in their life that they're not used to. And that's why we become creatures of habit. But that's not a good thing either. It means that we're not improving on ourselves. And so that's what we want to do here. And we respect the fact, but I would say, you know, like in the immediate future, there is no reason for the profit sector to be concerned at all. And then once we go through this process, and I'm sure that they know that because of the consultation process that they have the opportunity to come out and to speak about their business and to speak about the importance of their business and the service they offer, along with the parents that utilize those services that can come out and support them, that we'll be able to look at that in a holistic manner. Honestly, I do not have any preconceived outcome here in my mind. That might be what the profit sector is thinking, that I know where I want to go. I don't, because of the fact that I need to know from those sectors and the people of Nova Scotia and the parents where they would like to go. So that's where all the knowledge will come from, is what people would like to see in the province in terms of child care support. And so I can't predict where that would go. But presently, as I've said to the not-for-profit, they're not going to wake up tomorrow and find out that we have cut off their source of income. That's certainly not in any plans whatsoever with this department.
The Honourable Member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I can appreciate that private daycares can feel comfortable in the immediate future because you're just beginning the consultative process. So, you know, there's no decisions have been made. I sort of got, maybe it was my interpretation, and I can be wrong. You mentioned about in the future gradually going along, and it's almost like you're implying the possibility that that PEI model might become part of this process. You know, there's assurances for nonprofit daycares in this province. They're assured. We have a lot of private daycares in rural areas where not-for-profits do not exist. So I'm going to ask this question, and you can answer yes or no, but can you give assurances that there will be private daycares operating in this province in the future?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
As I mentioned, I'm not employing the PEI model, and I can't stand here and say I can assure any business is going to be in existence in the future. I can say that several things, that for-profit is a very important sector in the province of Nova Scotia. They run over more than half of the daycare services in the province, so they have as much of a stronghold on the daycare industry as the not-for-profit has. There's certainly opinions on both sides. There's opinions on how some non-for-profit daycares may operate. And we're always looking at how we can improve the services that they provide. So it's not that we just look at not for profit. We also look at both sides because we're looking at it in a holistic manner of the services. So what I'm saying is that we really truly understand and appreciate and support what they offer, but I cannot predict 6 months. I can't predict 12 months. I can't predict if there's going to be not-for-profits a year or 2 years or 3 years down the road. So I'm going to be honest about that. I'm not going to make it, like I said, with any commitment, but nobody should read any more into it than the fact is that nobody can predict the future. And that I think what the comfort is the fact that I've been very open and honest with both the profit and nonprofit. I've told both of them as we move along with this process that we will maintain communications with them, very good open communications. And in fact, they are going to be part of the process in making the future decision. So they have as much opportunity to be out there and formulating a new model. If that's what is decided by the people of Nova Scotia, they will have just as much fair input into that than anybody else.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I have to talk about the uncertainty. You say that the review is not going to be forthcoming this summer, but it's actually going to be the consultative process that begins this summer. Am I correct in saying that?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Well, once again, I guess we're getting tangled up in the terminology of review and consultation. What we're developing now is the framework. How do we go the next step, which would be consultation? While we're developing the framework, what we want to do, of course, is look at the timelines. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very important to be balanced in your timelines. Sometimes consultation processes actually take too long and you're not getting to the outcomes because of that. So there has to be a balance there. We haven't gotten to that point yet. We're just developing that framework. I think you'll see things move along much more quicker once the framework is put together, and that once the decision is made of the consultation process and how we can make sure that all those who have an interest in being consulted have that opportunity, then we'll have a better idea and be able to explain, you know, what these timelines look at, what they're going to look like, I should say. And it's very important to us, as we know, we respect the fact that because it's you know, it may be a change or may not be a change in the system that we have today, that people always feel uncomfortable because they're worried. And I understand and appreciate that. So that's why we want to do this within a reasonable time frame. And we certainly have that as a prime you know, concern for ourselves too.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I realize it's hard to set a time because of the process that are taking place, but in reality, this could be a month away, it could be 6 months away, it could be 2 years away. And again, that's what's creating the uncertainty with all the organizations that are out there. And I know you can't give a firm commitment, but do you have a, can I say, a drop-dead date as to when this might be coming forward? You know, it might happen before then, but what's the latest possible time that you will be bringing this forward?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I don't have a specific date because we're working on the framework right now, and I know that I would like to be able to provide you with a date, but I know that it is, you know, in anything that you're working on, and we have multiple responsibilities and tasks, that this is a very important one. This is not just a community services initiative. This is a government-wide initiative, so I think that that should express to yourselves and along with the both of those sectors, the importance that we put on early years and the daycares and the early years and development. And so we know we want to move this along. We don't want this to drag on for several years. So I can say that you're not going to be standing here 2 or 3 years down the road and find that we haven't gotten anywhere, because we realize how important it is. And that's why we want to move it along. But it would be unfair for me to put time frames in at this moment, because we're not far enough in the framework process to be able to do that. And I'm hoping that, you know, within the next several months that we'll be at that point that we would have more concrete dates. There's many things that you have to also consider, like if you're doing a consultation process, when is it going to be? If you're ready to do it in the summertime, is that really a realistic time to do it when people are on vacations and they're typically not thinking about things like that? So we have to respect that too. So, you know, we want as many people as possible to have the opportunity to come to us through that process. So therefore, we also want to make sure that when we decide to have the consultation process in the province, that it's done in a time that gives most individuals or businesses that opportunity to bring forward their recommendations.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I realize my time is almost at an end
No.
for this. Oh, we have 2 more minutes left. Oh, okay. That gives me a chance to get into the discussion on grants. And
Excuse me, 1 moment, 1 minute left.
okay, thank you.
You.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if the Minister would comment on what grants are available to childcare centres for enhancing playground equipment.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
There was actually a grant for playgrounds available 2 years ago, but that is not available presently.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does the department is it looking at reintroducing that program for playground facilities?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Not at this time frame, and I haven't received any interest coming back to me from the sector to say that they're looking at it, that there's a need at presently. So that's why it hasn't been brought forward on the table for discussions.
Thank you. The time allotted to the Progressive Conservative Party has elapsed. I now recognize the Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am very pleased today to be able to join the debate on community services. And I'm going to take a little bit of time here in the beginning just to acknowledge some of the individuals within the department, the Portland Street office, and some folks in the community that after going into 7 years as an MLA in Dartmouth North have been able to and actually willing to assist me with helping my constituents and many other individuals who've approached our office from around HRM. I want to begin by welcoming George and Dave here today. They're steady participants during the budget process over the last number of years, so I want to welcome them today. I also want to thank folks like Dan Troke from head office down on Spring Garden Road. I've done a lot of work around housing pieces, ESIA program with both Dave and Dan over the years. I want to thank people like Vicki Wood, who is in probably one of the more difficult positions in the department, dealing with issues of child welfare. Vicki's been very accommodating when I have requests and concerns and issues and basic guidance when I have questions that I need answered for constituents and families that come to me. I want to thank people like Linda Butler-Fox in the department of head office, who has been more than willing to get back to me on a number of occasions when I've had concerns or needed to get in contact with particular people, including the minister. Linda Tabner. Linda Tabner is a very friendly voice on the other end of the phone downtown Spring Garden Road. Linda's been very, very helpful to me, and you know, the question always is, what can I do for you now, Trevor, whenever she picks up the phone. So I want to acknowledge Linda's efforts over the year. Folks at Metro Regional Housing Authority, people like Jecka Lewis, 420-2111. Jecka is on speed dial in my office and has been more than accommodating. And another individual who has spent many years at a number of level of governments and is currently working down there. I think she's going on 40 years now, and Deborah Way. Deborah and I have had many conversations about issues and concerns around housing and accommodating some of the folks that are trying to enter into the system. Deborah brings a wealth of experience and knowledge and has always been very helpful. Dorothy Langthorne is another individual that deals with housing grants, and Dorothy has been tremendous working with a lot of families that come to our office for the home repair grants, a lot of seniors who've been successful in receiving help to stay in their home and have their homes fixed through the department. When I talk about community services, I represent a community that is comprised of probably I know for a fact, the highest low-income concentration in all of HRM. So to come here as an independent, I'm allotted 2 hours of debate, and those 2 hours will be exhausted with the Department of Community Services. And for individuals in the public that might be watching this or checking on Hansard, the reason I do this is because 98% of the cases that come through my door and the work that I do is on behalf of people who are affected or who are funded through the Department of Community Services. So this is indeed my opportunity to hold governments to account, question issues and concerns that constituents have brought to me. That being said, the main office that I deal with in Dartmouth is the Portland Street office. And there are a number of individuals down there that I'd like to recognize today real briefly who have, again, been more than willing to pick up the phone, contact me back, work with constituents and getting them what they need to be moving forward in that process. I want to start by acknowledging 3 main supervisors over there. And I've already warned them, even though most of them have spent over 30 years plus in the department, please don't retire as of yet. There's still more work to be done. Individuals like Greg Cromwell, who I know has been in the department for well over 35 years. Mike Caswell, who's into 32 years, I believe now. And Sheila Lenehan, who has come over from most recently from the Halifax office over the last year. These supervisors have a daunting task when it comes to dealing with caseworkers who have caseloads of upwards of 200 individuals. And some real tough decisions and some tough decisions that have had to be made in the last 6 months that have greatly affected my community and constituents that, again, rely on the funding of community services. I also want to acknowledge the director, Barry Smittle. There was some major changes within the department. Let's call it tweaking a policy back in the fall. I brought that to the attention of the minister, and to her credit, she had put the wheels in motion, and Mr. Smittle had more than willingly came into the office, met with me and my assistant personally to go over some of the mandate that had been put in place for the department to address. And he also, again, anytime we have called from our office, my assistant Kathy and I, in relation to issues that either the supervisor or caseworkers weren't able to address, Barry has been more than willing, and especially long after the 4 o'clock or 4:30 bell, he's been more than willing to contact us. Just want to briefly mention some caseworkers. I know I did this last year, and I'm not going to hopefully miss some folks, or I don't want to make people feel bad, because we do work with everybody down there, and I do appreciate their efforts, but I want to mention a few individuals that we consistently deal with. Caseworkers like Cheryl Rogers, Shauna Lacey, Ivy Bowie, Jennifer McLeod. Jennifer's been with the department again for a number of years, and very straightforward, very frank in her approach, but has a wealth of knowledge in assisting clients and constituents and our office. Troy Mousseau is another individual who's recently come over to the Dartmouth office. Troy originally was working in the housing division downtown in Spring Garden Road, and Troy over the last year has really made some good inroads and has really worked on something that I believe has had to take place in the last number of years and been pushing, and that's that building that relationship piece with the clients, what we call clients. Troy is famous for his home visits and really trying to wrap around services that individuals need and pointing people in the right direction. And a direct reflection of his success has been the fact that his caseload has actually gone down. So I want to acknowledge Troy. Gabriel Adui, Terry Lewis, Kim Crow. Kim Crow is a real champion for individuals on IA, and also a real champion for staff and the way that staff are treated and their expectations. Kim is a wonderful worker, and again, I hope someone like Kim doesn't soon depart. I want to touch base. We had a lot of individuals in the fall, a lot of slots open, and again, I brought this to the attention of the minister. We had, unfortunately, we lost a couple senior members who were caseworkers for many years due to serious illness and very, stressing situations. But we went through a process, and now we have some success, and we have some new members I just want to touch base on. And I'm real encouraged, and hopefully that, they do continue to apply for the full-time slots. They're temps right now. But people like Jennifer Willis, who originally started in the Halifax office last year, she went out on maternity leave, and I was very pleased to pick up the phone one day and find out that she had actually filled one of those slots in a temp position. And I've been made aware as of yesterday that her temp position is now extended into May, and I really encourage her to put forward a motion to become a full-time caseworker. Jennifer has a background with Service Canada. She's very, very thoughtful, and again, as far as building relationships with constituents, finding out what their real needs are. She's very policy-oriented as well. Jazzy Simons and Jennifer Meyer are two other individuals I want to make mention. In the Halifax office, people I've done work with, one individual in particular from the New Waterford area, Karen Blackwood, I want to make mention of her. Karen works with a lot of individuals, women in particular, who come out of the transition homes. Oftentimes our office does get a lot of calls from women who are in homes or coming out of homes from like Briney or Barry House, women who are trying to find housing services, often end up in Dartmouth North, and Karen ends up being the worker on the other end that we have to build that relationship with, and Karen's been fantastic. Scott Hart's another individual, and we lost a key caseworker who was in Dartmouth for a number of years, Laurie Jacqueline, last year, but it was for a good reason. Laurie has now become a supervisor out in Lakeside, so I want to mention Laurie. After going into my 7th year as being MLA, I know that there's a lot of people, members and people within the department that know that I'm a pretty hands-on person. And sometimes we have to hold people's hands to make sure that they do take those steps. But my success and their success comes at the hand of other individuals as well. And these few folks that I just want to take a quick mention of are individuals and organizations that they give their heart, they give their all in the service that they provide. When folks are in need and we make a call on their behalf, these are folks that really have come to bat and have really helped us accommodate these individuals with their needs. People like Mel and Yolanda. Mel Bootler at Parker Street. And I know Parker Street's in Halifax, but many times I've called at the last minute and asked Mel if he could put together some food, and we drive over and we pick up that food for that individual. Mel's also helped with power bills and oil. Yolanda's a key staff person there, and Yolanda's always been great, and the many volunteers there as well. Mel, it's a unique program. It's a fantastic program, and Mel, as I made mention in a resolution last week, has received many honors, and deservedly so. Locally, my local outreach, Hester Street Food Bank and Outreach, the folks there, Francis and Tom, Gordon McKean was the executive director, and Gordon is finally retired after a number of years. All the volunteers that open up on Wednesdays, they take the food in on Tuesdays, they work it on Wednesdays every week. These folks are seniors. They're wonderful folks that provide a great service for the community of Dartmouth North and continue to do so. St. Anthony's Church, St. Vincent de Paul, the Victoria Road Baptist Church. I want to thank the guys that open up on Wednesday afternoons. For those people that miss the mornings, they open up at 3 o'clock in the afternoons, and that's very accommodating for a lot of individuals. I want to commend the Salvation Army. In the last 2 years, I know they've received a tremendous amount of funding from the government for their Good Neighbor program. Our office has reached out on a number of occasions to Salvation Army, whether it was for home heating or electric bills being paid, or merely taking an individual in when they're in crisis and they're without housing. I've called, and without question, they've been able to accommodate me in my request and help that individual. Two individuals, actually, it's a little organization here in Halifax. Halifax Housing Help is another organization that has taken on a lot of help with our office. Donnie Bennett, I want to make mention of Donnie Bennett, Tess Warner as well. Donnie runs a trustee program there with Tess, and with some of the recent requirements and changes with policy within the department, we've seen the trusteeship grow with a lot of constituents who rely on the department for funding. But they also help with the housing piece. They also provide supportive services as well. And I can say that when I make my trips to Halifax, it's either to see Mel, and I go around the corner, and it's to see Donnie and Tess. I want to make mention of Pastor Yarn and all the folks at another local church in my community. Again, late into the evenings, our jobs as MLAs never end. As many people in the department and society might believe, it's 24/7, and oftentimes we have individuals who come to us in crisis all hours of the night, any day of the week, and folks like Pastor Yarn and the folks that run the clothing bank there have been tremendous in providing whatever little bit of food or clothing that our constituents need. I know Nova Scotia Power is a bit of a poison word to some folks in the province. The power rates, there's no question, are very high. It's very difficult. It's made life very difficult for constituents. But I want to acknowledge the fact that in going into my 7th year, I lost count of how many power bills my name is associated with in trying to get help. But I want to commend the people that work in the call center for Nova Scotia Power. The level of compassion that they have now compared to 6 years ago has definitely changed. They're very, very understanding as far as the approach and what it takes to actually solve an individual's disconnection notice. They have a clear understanding now, I think, as far as the process between the MLA's office and the department itself. And I also want to acknowledge the individuals that work in collections that service Nova Scotia. It's probably one of the worst jobs that you have to have, a collection agent. But I've had the opportunity over the last number of years to speak with a lot of individuals who are collecting what were former overpayments with the Department of Community Services, be it for seniors or folks that go on Canada Pension Disability and have those amounts. Those folks have been very great in trying to work out and accommodate those individuals with payment. There's still some issues there, but it's not entirely with them, but they've been very receptive. And to start this way, I think it's important because I believe that I have achieved a level of success in helping a tremendous amount of people in my community and in HRM move forward with their lives, but it's simply not in my hands. So I just wanted to take that time to acknowledge those folks. I want to begin with something that I know the minister fully understands, that in going into my 7th year, this has probably been my one pain that I continuously bring up. I know one thing I want the minister to start is in her opening speech last night, she did make mention that the personal allowance increase would go up by $9. And I believe it's $7, so I'm going to get her to check that and give me the correction on that. But I want to begin with the ESIA program and talk about the shelter component. In 2006, we seen the last time the shelter allowance was increased. It was increased by $15. It's 2012 now, and we haven't seen an increase in that allowance yet. I believe my first time in the House, the then minister in 2006 made a statement that, well, we've increased the personal allowance by $6, and that equates to about $4-point-some million or $9 million. So we can't do both. The next year when I asked the question, she put it on the floor of this House that if we do that, we merely leave it to the landlords to take that money, so it doesn't help the individual. But I can tell you today that I'm going to ask it, and and it's not for this particular government, it's for any government, because we have to understand there's rising rents, and that puts a burden on individuals who are in receipt of income assistance. It's more than 30% of their budgets, most times upwards of 50 to 60% of their budgets. So my question to the minister today is, can she tell me why governments are not willing to increase the shelter component?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First, I'd be remiss in not saying to the member opposite to thank him very much for his kind words towards staff and community services. And he should know that it's recognized and very much appreciated by myself, senior staff, and other staff that you've mentioned in your opening question. And I know when I came in as Minister of Community Services that I always know that, you know, the reputation of community services and staff is a difficult one. They do not receive the accolades and the credit that they deserve. A lot of what I learned very quickly is a lot of the decisions, it's very difficult, I know, for many of those individuals to have to look at someone who has great needs and to know that the system doesn't have all the solutions or answers or the programs that that individual may need, and they have to say no to them. There can't be a worse situation to be in, to look at somebody that you empathize with and you know that they are needy of certain services or supports. And what I discovered was that it was, you know, it's not the individuals in the department, and I put it in quotations, it's the system that we've been living under for too many years that put staff in that position of saying no. And then, of course, people are going to backlash at the staff. It's the system that needs to be a backlash at the system. And that's what we've been trying to do as a government, is to make changes to a system that's very much locked into a financial style rather than a style of what's important for the individual. So I want to thank you for standing there and recognizing that. And I know through staff how much they appreciate you as a MLA in your style, and that your style is very restorative. And I think that a lot of members sitting in the opposition can take a lesson from you with regards to your style, your approach to me as a minister, to communicate and come to myself if there's an issue, rather than bringing it to the floor of the House and making it an issue for political points. Because you know ultimately what that does is it actually hurts those people that you're trying to help. And you're an individual who has recognized that, and recognized that it's the people that you are trying to help that you're standing up for. You're not standing up for yourself to gain some type of political points in that. So I want to thank you very much for that. And I think that the evidence is in the results. and the fact that you have been able to help so many individuals in your constituency and also people outside. Whether they live in your constituency or not does not matter to you. If they come to you for help, you turn on that help mode button very quickly, and you make very smart decisions on who you need to go to within the department. And I know that the staff within the department respects that, and that they do whatever they can within their power to provide you with the service that you need to help the individual that you're standing tall for. And I really believe that, you know, when it comes to community services, it's a very emotional department. It's a difficult department because we're talking about people's lives and the people that are vulnerable, that, you know, some of us are more fortunate than others, and that because of that we need to be working together collaboratively in a restorative approach to help individuals rather than arguing about it on the floor, which doesn't help anyone. And I really want to express my gratitude and respect for you for always being very professional in your mannerism, and being able to know that what you're trying to do is to help people, and that is your main goal, is to help individuals. And our staff members work very hard each and every day to provide the services that needs to be there. And as I said, that it can be very challenging because of the system. So what we're doing is we're working very hard to make a change. I think that you have seen that over the last 3 years within the Department of Community Services. We've had many discussions, you and myself, with respect to this system and how difficult and challenging that can be. And so I can say that I'm very proud of all the staff in community services and the hard work and the dedication. What we're trying to do is, and this can be challenging, is to create a new system that provides flexibility, that provides a service that focuses on individual needs, but also we make sure that there's no abuse of that. And so there's a real balancing game that we must do. But we also have to respect the fact that if we take a restorative approach, that we work with the client and to be able to find out what his or her needs are and how we could support those on an individual basis. That'll mean that we go outside of the way the system has always operated, that if you don't fit, I'm sorry, there's not a lot we can do for you. And the results of that is actually very negative, as you know, because what it does not support and help the individual to get off the system. It's very ironic to think that there's many times we expect somebody to come on to the system to provide them with supports or services. Now, that doesn't make sense, does it? It does not make sense. There's times when somebody may need a very little support, and if that was offered to them up front, they would have no need to go on the system. I know that with respect to shelter and housing, that is a concern of yours, and you've brought it up to me many times. And the difficulty there, and this is another one of those situations where if you have any thoughts or suggestions, I certainly welcome them, is what we have discovered is when shelter rates go up, what happens is then the rent goes up. So that shelter rate is lost in that increase in rent. And so at the end of the day, it means that the individual or that family isn't any better off. They don't have extra money in their pocket. So what we have tried to do is to provide other opportunities for increases in the annual dollar amount that an individual on the system through ESIA would be receiving. And I know certainly the increases that we have given over the last couple of years are quite substantial if you're in comparison to former governments. Last year it was a $15 an increase per month, and this year it's actually $9. It isn't $7, it is $9. So that's giving a $24 an increase a month in the last 2 years. Now, that I'm not going to stand here and stomp my feet and say that that's a great amount. I wish we could do more. We're working towards doing more by turning around the finances of the province. That'll give us more opportunities. We're working very hard to invest in people because investing in people is an economic stimulus. We know that. It's so vitally important that, you know, if people are working and people have that opportunity to go to work and to put money back into the economy, it stimulates the economy. Some of the other programs that you would be aware of that has increased the dollar amount to individuals would be the poverty reduction credit and the affordable tax credit, taking the provincial portion of the HST off of home heating for seniors, offering a tax rebate of $600, along with the other programs that we have been offering in terms of taking taxes off of diapers and items like that. We also have been looking at, what we've done is we're looking at all different areas, and I can say that the amounts that have increased in the opportunity for individuals to have, I think has been a good leap. For example, one area that I've been often concerned with too is people that we would in quote call the working poor, because they get hard hit. And as you know, we've had these discussions. There's a balance between how much is offered through income assistance versus those people that are working poor. And so as a government, we have increased the minimum wage, but yet at the same time too, because of the variety of programs that are offered now through the affordable tax credit and the poverty reduction tax credit, that a good example is a family making minimum wage with 2 children actually equates to an increase annually of $4,400 in their pockets more every year because of what we have done in the government. So, you know, it's very difficult to have a one solution on the shelter rates because of that fact that we know that they're going to lose those monies. I think it's really important for us to look at other means that we can get more money into the hands of those individuals that are receiving income assistance. And I think that the other avenue is that we've got to do a better job and work harder to help people become more employable. And I think that we've worked towards that, but we haven't done the sort of final part of that. We offer a lot of services in pre-employment and you know, help with resume writing and interviews, but we haven't done the part as much as we should in terms of going out there and networking with businesses and to establish relationships and to look at discussing with businesses opportunities for individuals to work for them and to kind of seal that deal for an individual. And so we recognize that, and so we're going to forward with a new strategy in the coming year to be focused on that. So, but I do welcome any suggestions that you have whatsoever in order to help with that shelter component. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comments of the minister. And like I said, I think it's important to acknowledge folks within the system and within our communities that help us as MLAs. And I think the Minister, you know, your comments are point on when you say it isn't about us. You know, we're elected to what I call navigate and negotiate the systems for people who don't necessarily know how to take those steps or who to contact. So I appreciate your comments there. I bring up the shelter allowance, and I have consistently done this for over the last 7 years. And I see and I recognize that you know, your government has taken some strides in helping families keep more money in their budgets. Single women who have children, you know, with the child's tax breaks and whatnot. But, you know, my office deals with a lot of individuals who either are suffering from mental health issues or addiction issues. So they come to the Department of Community Services. And I guess what I'm going to go through here now is a little education piece for folks that are listening that might not understand or have the knowledge of what these individuals actually receive for a shelter component. Currently, if somebody is suffering from mental health or an addiction issue, they're funded at a rate of $535 for a shelter component. If you're a single individual, and I know I've raised this before with the Minister in the form of a question during question period, if you're a single individual who, for whatever reason, finds themselves without employment, or and we consider them employable, that rate is $300. And I can tell you that 16 years ago it was $230. So governments over the years have raised that $70 over the last 16 years. And I see that as a real barrier, because you need a place to lay your head if you're going to have the confidence to wake up the next day and actually go out and be employable. But you can't find a place to live on $300 a month. For the folks that are battling mental health issues or addiction issues, $535 in my community, in the community of Dartmouth North, to receive the opportunity to have a somewhat decent, somewhat safe apartment in my community, we're looking at upwards of $600. And what happens over the years, and I know the Minister and I have had conversations about this, is individuals are forced to take the extra money to bump up their rent from their personal allowances. And I just want to illustrate it for the public that might be listening and for people that might read Hansard, you know, a little bit of an observation, a breakdown of what a monthly income for somebody who is suffering from an addiction or mental health issue is in receipt of from community services. We'll start with the $535 shelter allowance. With the increase coming of the $9, we'll bump up the what is now $229 to $238. That's $772. The department has recently, over the past number of months, made some adjustments as far as the requirements to medical transportation. And what we have now is a lot of individuals who are receiving bus tickets. So I'm going to put in $18 there for bus tickets. So that's around $790. Income assistance clients are able to receive special diet funding if it's medically related to an issue, and this has to come from their doctor. So we're going to add in another $27, and that's around $818. $818 a month. I think what the greater part of society has to understand is that many folks that are in receipt of EIA are living on incomes of less than $8,500 a month. And I'm talking specifically about individuals. When you take in consideration that $600 of that has to come out of rent, they have to pay power and possibly a phone, it leaves them with around $100 a month to eat on. And therein lies a real problem, because there's no possible way that you can eat healthy on that amount of money. We rely on food banks and the volunteers in our community that provide that service, but meat and potatoes aren't always provided. We have a lot of canned goods that come through the food banks that contain a lot of high sodium content. Folks on income assistance don't have the ability to really be able to eat healthy. So that's kind of why I bring up the issue around shelter allowance. And the Minister asked me if I had some ideas, and I talked about this over the years. I've talked about if we're able to provide an increase. I've made a suggestion that we are indeed the lawmakers here. We could possibly look at making an amendment to the Tenancies Act I've even, over the years, had conversations with several caseworkers who have said, well, why don't we just put it in the personal allowance? And then maybe the landlord won't understand. So they won't raise the rents. Realistically, and the reason I bring it up is because people are struggling. And when you're dealing with a mental health issue or an addiction issue, nutritional, healthy eating is a very important component of your overall well-being. And folks on income assistance just can't afford it. With the exercise that I made mention to you, Madam Minister, back in the fall, that the Dartmouth office has gone through, I've been there for going on 7 years. The former MLA was there for 8 years. And in and around special diet funding and transportation funding, we've seen an exercise take place where we've seen individuals have their normal $70 bus pass be taken away. Actually, let's say whittled down to a point of where, based on how many appointments they have, to about $18. And if they have 10 or more appointments, $36. Special diet funding, I honestly believe, and you can make a comment on this as to if the department is considering it, I strongly think that we should be looking at making an adjustment with the blue form, what we call our medical form. But if a doctor can fill that form out properly, you know, special diet funding is a key component. It gives additional money to income assistance clients to allow them to have that opportunity to have healthy foods. The problem with the recent adjustments is that we've seen a lot of individuals who lost funding for their bus pass, who lost funding for their medical special diets because the doctors, honestly, I don't believe the doctors have a full understanding as to what their requirement is when it comes to filling this form out. Some doctors have taken it upon themselves, unfortunately, to not